Hello, this is Truth Be Told Transformation, and I'm Bonnie Burkert, here to share tools for transformation to live your highest truth. One thing that's true for me is that I love birds, and I always think that birds maybe show up and they can be your friend, or maybe there's a message. One of those birds we see around a lot are crows and ravens. Sometimes I get confused which are which. So, for this episode today, I have brought on an expert to teach us well. Okay, welcome to you, Rick the Yambert.
Hi, Bonnie. Thanks for having me. It's always a good day to talk about crows and ravens. And I'm just really intrigued by the title, that transformation part, because that's as a paganism is my spiritual path. So crows really offer a way for personal transformation, in my view. So I look forward to talking about all this today. Thank
Rick,
you.
that's why we had you on. And when I saw that you were a Llewellyn author, and when I saw your book entitled Crows and Ravens, Mystery, Mythology, and the Magic of the Sacred Corvids, I really jumped at the opportunity to have you on the show. And so please, we'll just talk a little bit, chapter by chapter, and give us some ideas of what all's in the book. And yes, I want to know what your experience is. And like I said, it seems like there's always a bit of a message that could come from a bird. For example, I'll just start off the show with storytelling. That the other night, it was dark, and I was, tired of work and looking for a little something magical to shipped me out of too much computer. And there were these little wrens that were hanging on my door. And there were two of them, and I've never seen them. And they were kind of hanging on the glass, looking at themselves, actually. And for me, it just was very uplifting, right? So, I don't know, is that a tool? It's my imagination, certainly. But it was fun and joyful. And I'm going to look up and see what wren means, because, right, all of these birds have a very specific spiritual meaning. So, let's find out what you found to be probably the stories and the meaning behind crows and ravens, which have an extremely long history.
Well, that extremely long history, I think, is very important. And when I started writing this book and doing research, how it started was I wrote for The Wild Hunt, which is a pagan news website. So I was writing about arts and culture for The Wild Hunt. And my editor at The Wild Hunt, Heather Green, took a job with Llewellyn. And this is 8 or 10 years ago, I started taking photos of crows. I would shape-shift them using different digital programs and print the images on canvas. And the reason I did that was because these birds are sacred and supernatural creatures to me. And I wanted to portray them visually, this magical element. So anyway, I started posting those on Facebook. Heather saw them. We were friends on Facebook. And she said, Rick, you should write a book about crows and ravens. And anyway, so that's how it got started. But I did not know until I started deep research that in Lascaux Cave in France, where there's these 18,000 year old cave paintings, and one of the most significant is what they call the dead man, or the shaman. Anyway, it's a human with a bird head. He's lying on his back. There's a speared bison nearby that looks like it's been the victim of a hunt, and next to this bird-headed man is a staff with a bird on top. And it's not definitive that it's a crow, but most scholars that I've read, and I agree, believe that this must have been a crow or raven. So all this is to say, and why can we make that leap? Because crows and ravens are, their intelligence is comparable to chimpanzees, gorillas, and dolphins. One wildlife biologist, John Marsleff, and certainly check out his books on crows and ravens, but he calls them feathered apes. So it's not a leap to think that 20,000 years ago, these birds were, their behaviors were peculiar and startling to our human ancestors. And that's what's portrayed on that cave art in Lascaux. So that kind of blew my mind to think that this connection has been happening for millennia, that cultures around the world, and these are in my book, the ancient Norse, the Vikings, the ancient Celts, and the Native Americans of the Pacific Northwest are the ones I focus on in the book. But those in other cultures across the centuries have seen crows and ravens as magical creatures because it's evident in their behaviors. You mentioned wrens. I have Carolina wrens that come by at the house. I'm sitting on my back patio, cardinals, other birds. But as I and other crow writers have said, crows always look like they're thinking.
Yeah.
They look like they're up to something, and that freaks some people out. And some people, like you and me, it makes me go, what's going on here? They're not just looking for food based on their instinct. So,
Fantastic.
I don't know. I've said too much.
No, that's why we're here. So I just want to say that, I mean, I've heard so many stories about crows, certainly that they recognize people, for example. And
exactly.
I mean, I have a friend that she would throw peanuts out to the ravens, and she would go on a regular walk, similar path, and then it got to be to the point that the minute she got out her front door, they'd start following and collecting, and like, there's the blonde lady with the curly hair that always has peanuts, and
Yes.
I just love that. And then, of course, stories of crows bringing gifts.
I am so jealous. That has not happened to me. And I have friends who have had that happen, and it's all over the internet if you look at all these YouTube videos. But yes, that's a recognized phenomenon. And as you mentioned, it was John Marsluff, this wildlife biologist who, last I heard, teaches at the University of Washington. But he did scientific experiments that proved that crows and ravens, but he was working mostly with crows, they recognize human faces. I talk about this in my book. I just give a synopsis of his research because he was so intrigued when he would walk across campus. The crows would what's called scolding. They would dive bomb him and harass him, and he noticed that all the other students or anybody walking across the quad, it's like, why are they bothering me, leaving them alone? So, long story short, he took a taxidermied crow, and of course, he is not the type that would sacrifice a crow for research. So I don't anyway. But he's definitely a friend of crows. And he had somebody put on a caveman mask and walk across the campus with a taxidermy crow. And the crows just went, insane. They knew that this was not a friend of crows. Then he would have somebody else put on that mask and do the same thing without the bird, the taxidermy, and the crows would go crazy. Because he wanted to make sure that they weren't alerting on someone's scent or some other cue, but it was the face.
It was the scary caveman face.
Yeah, exactly. And at some point, he used the mask of Dick Cheney, the former vice president. And which is more scary. But one of the things about this is that whoever wore the mask, the crows would recognize that this is a bad person. This person, entity, whatever, is harmful to crows. But it gets more spooky because he, with his research, he further noticed that it wasn't just the handful of crows that saw him, or his people who were helping with the experiment, who saw the original mask. The masked person. It was other crows would alert. So basically, he figured out that the crows were communicating to other crows who didn't see the original transgression, but these other crows would also dive bomb people wearing the mask, who did not witness the masked person carrying a dead crow. So the crows are communicating to others. These are not friendly. And so that's kind of mind-blowing that they are able to communicate that. So
oh my gosh, there's so much. I really want to make friends with crows. I have to figure this out. Like, I had to figure out maybe where I could put out food for them and just let them know. I mean, it's just incredible when they come by. And sometimes, I mean, I guess I'm always looking for cues from nature, but they seem that they're very much available for that. They've got us going.
I think that's key too, because as I mentioned in the book, they are the most magical creatures that most humans will encounter. I mean, I live 5 miles from the Atlantic Ocean here in East Central Florida. I see dolphins out in the sea, but I don't have any encounter with them. I haven't been to Africa or any place where there's chimpanzees or gorillas who are highly intelligent. But every day in my backyard, I've been feeding them for like 10 or 12 or 15 years. But I go to my Target shopping center and the crows are up there. They're everywhere. They're very human gregarious, as I call them. And they're urban creatures. They're not afraid of people. They can be highly suspicious, but here's this opportunity to form communion, as I say in the book, with these creatures who have this unnatural, supernatural intelligence, who have connected to cultures across the centuries, whose the mythologies of the world and spiritual paths see them as sacred creatures. And something's going on with and I keep saying crows because here in Florida, the Audubon guide, nature guides, ravens are not found in Florida. So I speak about crows. Ravens, what's the difference? Ravens are considerably larger. There's YouTube videos where they have a very distinct calls. Crows, of course, caw is the traditional call. Ravens have more of a bronk or kind of guttural sound.
Okay.
And ravens have shaggy throat feather. So if you saw them side by side, and ravens are like 20% larger, if you saw them side by side, you'd be able to tell instantly. So I speak about crows because that's my direct experience.
No, it's great. And I did want to ask some of the distinctions. So thanks for telling us that. And in your book, there's also some great visuals for the people that want to see a little bit more closely. So you've got some good images to see. It's like, the head is a little bit more square on the raven and things like that. So let's take it over to the mythology and certainly the magic. So what are you mentioned the cave in France. What are some other early examples that you've come across? Either Corvid.
I'm laughing because it's one of my favorite tales in the book. I believe it, and I should know this. I believe it's in the Christian Bible, the King James Version, where there's one sentence where Noah in the flood on from the ark, Noah sent a raven before a dove went out, and the raven didn't return, and then Noah sent the dove out, and then anyway, most of us know that story. But there are some ancient Hebrew texts that was translated like in the early or late 1800s about a tale of a sassy talking raven who was on the boat with Noah, and Noah says to the raven, "You've got to go out and see if you can find land. It's in the flood." Well, the raven's having none of that. The raven says, and I had to read this story like 10 times to make sure I was reading it right. But the raven says, "You're trying to get rid of me because you want to be with my wife." The raven is accusing Noah of trying to get rid of him so that he can shack up with the raven's wife.
With the lady, Mrs. Raven. Okay.
What's that?
That's some serious imagination going on there.
Exactly. And we have no proof, of course, that there was a talking raven on Noah's Ark. But that just shows that, again, even way back, and I can't remember the original date of that text, but it's centuries old. Another one of the centuries old incidents, which I think there's truth to this from what I've read, but there was a battle between the ancient Romans and the ancient Gauls, and somehow it ended up where there was going to be one-on-one contact. The Roman champion was going to face off against the champion of Gaul, Gaul, and instead of all these armies, massive armies fighting each other, it was those two. Well, the Roman they're fighting, and a crow descends and messes with the Gaul warrior from Gaul, the Gallic warrior. And so the Roman wins. And so the ancient Romans saw that as this was a sign from the gods. The gods sent this bird to interfere on our behalf. And historically, there is a Roman general of that period whose his name was changed to include the word Corvid, which is the family, or maybe Corvus, the Latin. Anyway, his Corvus was added to his name because of this great victory in battle. And that's historically documented. That's not a myth that this guy existed and adopted a name after.
I wonder what the crow did to the Gaul.
He just was kind of
flying his.
I think it's kind of like what they did to those University of Washington and experiments, just distracting them and just like you said, flying in their face according to the ancient text.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. I mean, we're going to go back to some of these other stories, okay? But I'm going to ask you really quickly about training crows. And we hear about how birds have been, for example, homing pigeons. You said the homing pigeons, right? And those were used for a purpose, perhaps even in war, for example. And that's way, way later. But do we know how trainable crows and ravens are to do our bidding, or are they just smart and clever, but they don't necessarily want to work for us?
That's there's conflicting evidence of that, and maybe evidence is not the right word. I'll just share some things from my experience. I've had friends, and of course, in writing on, researching on the internet, there are a lot of videos out there of people who own crows or ravens, and the raven will come up and fly and land on their shoulder, and they give them peanuts or crackers. So it seems like it's been done, but I don't think there's any, from what I've seen, any definitive, foolproof way. I've been free to train crows or ravens. On a side note of this, you may have heard this tale. In the Tower of London is a nest of ravens. Have you heard of this?
Sure, I have. I don't know too much about that, but sure, that's a big part of the mystery and the history.
Exactly. And the myth is, as long as the ravens nest there, Britain will not fall to any foreign invader. So they have a raven master who tends to the ravens. They treasure them, and then, I don't know, when I was researching the book 5 or 8 years ago, I came across this factoid from a credible source that they clipped the wings of the ravens so that they cannot fly away. I know.
Cool.
That's
for those people that are listening and not watching my reaction. My arms are crossed and my brow is furrowed. I'm like,
that's just. And I assume, because I read that from what I consider a credible source, my background as a daily newspaper journalist, we have a saying, And I was writing mostly arts and entertainment and features during my 30-year career. But we have a saying in the newsroom, if your mother says she loves you, check it out. Meaning, never assume that, especially in this internet age. So
right.
That's what I read.
We don't.
But it just, that's us humans. We have to establish dominion. We try to shape our fate and do anything we can to, which I guess pursuing a magical oriented pagan religion like I do, that's part of it. But there are limits to what we can and should do to try and
that's a little paranoid, I dare say, but we do like that they care so much, that tradition is is steeped in, is so old, and
yes,
that the monarchy and the empire needs the crow, needs the raven.
Yes.
It's probably the ravens, right? I don't know.
Yes,
is it
yes.
ravens? So.
Yeah.
No, it's so magical. So, hey, you mentioned the Norse mythology.
Yes.
With Corvids. Go ahead and tell us anything you've got.
Well, it's in case most people don't know, and Odin and Norse mythology is not part of my pagan path, but in researching that, I knew some things about it. And in researching it, Odin, the principal Norse god, the god of the religion of the Vikings of Scandinavia. Odin is the chief god. He has 100 different names. A lot of them are the raven god and a few others that have ravens in them. Anyway, on Odin's shoulders are two ravens, and Ugin and Munin, and the myth, which is in actual texts that survive. These two ravens fly each day from the realm of the gods. They fly down to Midgard, the human realm. They check out everything, and then they go and report back to Odin what they've seen. And, many texts call them Odin's spies. They're spying for Odin, which I'm a little more charitable. But their names, Ugin and Munin, translate as thought and memory. And when I first started reading and hearing about that, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, that's interesting. And then the more I studied and the more I became conscious of the crows, again, these are ravens, but their cousins, the crows, are who I have experience with. And then I realized, just in watching crows, anybody who has encounters with crows or sees them for over a length of time, you realize that these birds think. They use tools. They can get at water. They're playful. They do have thought. And as John Marslis has proven, they have memory. They can remember human faces. So that took away some of the mystery of the Scandinavian myths when I found out about it, but it also upped my admiration for the ancient Norse. They were keen observers of nature. They saw these birds and realized that something is going on beyond the ordinary animal kingdom. So they named Odin's raven thought and memory. And of course they did. That's a practical thing because they observed these birds exhibiting that. So that's a nice. That's a amazing confluence of the practical and the mythological. That this culture 1,000 or more than 1,500 years ago were observing these birds, and like me today, they were realizing these birds have uncanny abilities, and they must somehow be connected to the gods, the goddesses, and the other realm.
So thank you for that. And again, that's you've got a whole chapter dedicated to that in the book, correct? So more on that in Rick's book. So let's talk about, I want to talk about counting crows.
Yes.
Divination through the number of crows you see, correct?
Yeah.
Like, I know the band. Rick and I both were talking about it. He was a music reviewer, and my background is in the music business. So, of course, we're not talking about the band here.
Yeah.
But I guess the band were onto this. They must have had their own fascination with it. But I did not realize at the time of that band's success and me loving them that counting crows is a thing.
Yes. Yeah. And like a lot of oral traditions, it's the tradition of counting crows as a sign of certain omens. There's so many variations on it. If you look up, and don't quote me precisely on this, but it's like, traditionally it applied to magpies, which are cousins of crows and ravens. They're part of the Corvid family. But anyway, so it's like 1 crow means happy, 2 means sorrow, 3 means a wedding, 4 means beware tomorrow. I'm making that up.
Yeah.
But there's so many variations on it. And it seems to have originated in the British Isles, but it also came to America. But on a deeper tangent of that, which I cover more extensively in the book, there's an ancient text from Tibet that was written around what is modern-day Tibet, around, I think, 900 A.D., and then there's another ancient Irish text that was written around 15 or 1600 in the Common Era. And each of these texts are basically lists of crow sounds, crow vocabulary. So the text of these is kind of like, if you hear a crow go goop, goop in the morning, a king will appear. If you hear a crow go gaka, gaka at a certain time, your horses will be stolen. And I'm making up those sounds, but it brings up a very interesting thing about crows. Their vocabulary is far more extensive than the traditional caw, caw. It's insane. I've heard a crow that sounds, I call it the kitty cat call. One day, this was 4 or 5 years ago or longer, in my home here in Palm Coast, Florida, I heard a cat stuck up in a tree. And, you've seen the TV shows or as a kid or something where the little kitten stuck up in the tree, and you have to get the fire company because the kitten's too scared to crawl back down. And I heard a cat way up. It's like, oh man, how's that kitty cat going to get down? Well, I watched it for about 5 minutes, and the end. It was a crow. It was a crow going, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and that was the first time. And now I hear it, once or twice a week. The crows behind my home will do it. They make a sound like a dove. Kind of a cooing sound.
What is
I've heard
the clicking sound that they do?
What's that?
They do little clicking sounds.
Yes, the clicking.
What's that all about?
I don't know. I don't know. But that's part of my book, and I think it's something that anybody who wants to pursue what I call crow magic is to keep a journal corresponding these different sounds with when you hear them and the circumstance. And I don't know what the clicky-clack sound is, but I can say that almost all of these vocalizations, I rarely hear them when they're flying. They're usually in my backyard when they're perched on trees.
Yeah.
And there's certain times of the day. However, I went to the Florida Pagan gathering this past weekend, my girlfriend Michelle and I. And until that, I told Michelle, did you hear that? Yeah, Dart.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's Dart, the crow. He's back for his feeding.
You've named them.
I do name them, yes. This year, I know I'm diverging all over everywhere, but where I am in Central Florida, it seems to be every spring, February, March, April, the crows who came by disappear, and new crows come by. And it's like, how do you tell the difference?
Yeah.
Because they all look alike. And they do. But they have so many different behaviors. 1 year, 3 crows that came in the spring, they would get the crackers I threw on the lawn, and they would fly to the top of my house and eat them. Other crows will go to a certain tree. If you observe them, it's their behavior. And the current crow, most days, it's just one crow who comes by now. Last spring, it was 9 crows who would come by.
Interesting.
But the current crow, he picks up crackers, he runs over, darts over to the water ditch and dips the cracker in the water. So he's always moving kind of quickly. So I named him Dart, as in darting here and there.
Fantastic.
So,
and I love to hear that he dips his cracker to make it a little softer. It's just amazing. And there's all you have to do is a search on Instagram or your favorite social media platform to see all kinds of incredible interactions with all kinds of birds, but specifically, to our conversation, crows and how clever they are. I saw one playing tic-tac-toe and he beat the master, and he was all chuffed. He got all fluffy, like, I know I won, and I'm getting my treat. And it was incredible. And I mean, we do, my segue is thinking about the interaction, right? And so this person on Instagram had clearly trained the crow. And I'm just thinking about how so often we saw the crow with, depicted with wizards and wise men. You mentioned Odin, and maybe that's kind of where it comes from. And we're talking mostly Northern European, and I do want to talk about Native American as well in our remaining time. But it's very interesting to think about. It's almost like, what came first? Man inviting the crow or raven to be a part of their magical studies and listening, working with earth magic, or did the raven choose them and said, you know what, human, you're okay, I'll participate, and you might even learn a thing or two from me.
I have felt that way at times, that I'd love that you have that insight or intuit that, because they seem to be, they're intelligent enough to avoid human. It's like my editor, Heather Green, bless her heart. She lives in Atlanta, and we were exchanging emails, and she said, Rick, I hear crows in my backyard, but I put out food, but I can't get them to come. And I said, well, this is just a guess, but crows have been known, if there's articles out there about this, if crows connect a certain location to a misfortune, they will avoid that. So if a crow has been killed or even just died or at the hands of a predator, at a hawk or a larger bird or whatever, they will avoid that area. So they have that intelligence to choose to do things. So if they don't want to come to your backyard, there's probably a reason for the crows. And so I feel blessed. I don't just assume that any and everybody can have this communion, but actually you will run into them. They're ubiquitous. I see as many crows when I go to the Target shopping center as I do in my backyard.
Yeah,
really,
it's incredible. I mean, big fan. And I would say, I lived in New York City. In fact, I had like a crazy story about Manhattan. Pretty much you saw pigeons and sparrows. I think, there are little falcons that are around, but, you wouldn't see that on the day-to-day. But I was, again, mentioning my background in the record business, and one of the artists we worked with sadly passed away. He was a bluesman from New Orleans, and always sang about sad songs. And we had gone to a memorial for him, and I went back to my office, which was up on the 16th floor in Rockefeller Center. I mean, Midtown Manhattan. And on the opposite building, there was a crow, or possibly raven. Let's just say crow for the purpose. And it was just sitting there, and I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen, because I've always looked, and I'd never seen that. And so for me, I'm giving myself goosebumps as I tell you this story. It just felt like a little wink, wink. We were our collective team were sad, and we were recognizing this man of mystery that had left us, and it felt like we had a little mystery right there that had happened. And I mean, that was just for me. I don't think there was anybody else in the office that assigned meaning to it. But even back then, before I knew anything about this, I was noticing how crows show up, and
There was a story in the New York Times, I think it was within the past 3 or 5 years, about how ravens were being spotted again in New York City. Because they had been kind of driven out of their population had declined in the Northeast over a century or more, and there was an article that people were starting to see ravens more in New York City, actually. But I'm totally there with you. Here's how I'll get into. Here's how I kind of loosely define magic. That's an amorphous, a big term. And my pagan path is all about communing with nature, earth energies, the natural world, and as a pagan, I see divinity as having feminine aspect as well as a masculine aspect. But here's how I define magic. It's like you put a seed in the earth, you have sunlight, you have water. What happens? The plant grows. Yay. Okay, most people say that's not magic. Well, at some point in the development of humanity, way back when, our ancient ancestors noticed that if you put that seed in the earth and it's winter outside, it's not going to grow. So at some point, humans learn to be in communion, to be attuned to these earth energies. It's like, oh, we can't plant a seed in the dead of winter. We have to wait till the cycle of the season. So I leap from there to take dreams. A lot of cultures see dreams as prophetic, as divination, as somehow connecting us to the other realm. Well, science knows a little bit about dreams, but they don't really know why we dream. But I think if we understood more about the energies and the happenings of what's going on in the dream world, it's magic to us when we have a dream that comes true. It's magic to us when a person dies and we see a crow or raven. But I think if we understood the rhythms and energies of the earth, of Gaia, the earth goddess, as I personify it, we will understand more and more that those kind of things are possible. Right now, they're deep mysteries. So my girlfriend, Michelle, who's a psychic intuitive witch, and I love that she will, like you said earlier, she'll say, well, this happened, this synchronicity, and she'll say, well, maybe my imagination is just making connections that aren't there. But maybe not. But like
I mean, it's always a question, and I would say, just for the listener, to take pause with that, and it's okay to trust it. Listen to that instinct, right? Because if we're going to start to overthink it, I don't know. So I think that's a good call. And what you said, Rick, about closer into nature, listening to nature. If nothing else, it brings you to present moment. And then in that, there's such a potency that we can learn and perhaps find answers, a neutrality even, just because you're in awe of a sunset, a flower, or, hearing a crow and their funny songs and their beautiful wings. I mean, just to hear them flying. Last night I was hiking, and it was like, as they flew by, and it's just, again, I think it brings a presence.
Yes.
So I'm keeping you a long while, but I can't let you go without talking about Native American totems and spirit animals and how crow and raven play into that. And are they distinctive in Native American cultures?
They are distinctive. In the book, I focus on the mythologies of the Pacific Northwest tribes.
Okay.
And there are crow tails and there are raven tails. Ravens are much more prominent. And there are some myths where crow and raven are both kind of wobbling. But mostly the Pacific Northwest tales, raven is a trickster. Raven is a trickster. And I cover this in the book, different trickster tales. One of my favorite tales is Raven is helping some villagers. He wants to go with them as they're sailing down a river to get some foods, to find some berries where the berries are. And anyway, Raven hops out of the canoe and runs ahead. And anyway, long story short, he poops and he pisses and in the bushes. And this is his superpower. He makes his poop and piss talk. That's Raven's great superpower in this tale.
Wow.
And so he convinces the others that he's behind the bushes fighting off these invaders. But really what he's doing is he's eating all the food before his companions can collect it. So he goes back and says, "Oh, I was attacked. They made off with all the food." And you heard them calling out, and it's his poop and his piss that was able to make talk. Anyway, they get back to the village, and one of the Native Americans in the village says, "Hey, Raven tricked you. Yeah, there were no invaders. He ate all the food, so you've been duped." So, and that's the thing about Raven. A lot of times he's looking out for himself, but despite his selfish intentions, he ends up benefiting humankind. And that's particularly true. There's a creation myth from the Haida, Haida tribe, and I think it's probably in other tribes. But Raven steals light, the sun and moon and stars that this old man keeps in a box. And the old man wanted it dark because he believed his daughter was ugly. Raven wants the light, so he tricks the young woman into eating a pine needle that he has transformed himself into. The woman becomes pregnant. She gives birth to a raven human child. The old man said, "This is kind of weird, but okay, this is my grandchild." Anyway, Raven squawks and says, open the box with the light." Finally, the old man does. Raven steals the sun and moon and stars, and then he drops them when Eagle starts going after Raven. So he drops the sun and moon and stars, and that's why we have light in the world.
Fabulous.
Yeah, Raven the bastard was stealing them for himself, and he botched the theft, and we humans are the beneficiary. So.
Trickery,
Yeah.
and magic and lore, and who comes up with these stories? But how fun is it to know and contemplate and apply them to our current day? So, Rick, we are here in May of 2024. Is the book out?
Yes, the book is out. It's been out since March. It's available on Amazon. It's available on the Llewellyn website. Yeah. And I hope
wide.
And I hope readers will certainly, if they have a independent or metaphysical bookstore in their town, I hope they will, or city, that I hope they will visit there and support those. I'm not anti big box chain bookstores. I've bought many books, and I'm grateful they're in my neighborhood. But I'm especially, enamored. Anytime I go anywhere outside, visiting, traveling, I want to find the used bookstores, the independent bookstores.
Fantastic. And the magical stores, right? And the stores that support us with all the tools we need, the crystals and the cards and the incense and the handles and things like that. And certainly the books. Again, it's Rick's book is Crows and Ravens, Mystery, Myth, and the Magic of the Sacred Corvid. Rick Yambert, give us your website. What's the best website for people to find you? I know you're doing all kinds of things. There's art, there's music, there's events.
Yes. rickdeyampert.com. My name's kind of tricky. So it's RickDeyampert.com. That's my website. My MrCrowArt.com, Mr. is spelled out. That's where you can find my crow art on there and see a visual. That's not my crow art on the cover. I wish Llewellyn had used that, but anyway, they have their ways. But I love what they did with the cover and the inside.
It's a beautiful book, and we congratulate you and are super grateful. I know that Robert Hensley, Truth Be Told paranormal teammate here, did a review of your book too. I don't know if you've had a chance to check that out, but we're big fans here. We're big fans of Llewellyn and certainly this subject. And Rick, you've been really a joy to talk to, and we look forward to more. Come back again and tell us some more stories. But in the meantime, you have to go read his book to hear them all.
Well, thank you so much, Bonnie. It's been a joy and a pleasure, and a way to more connection to spirit for me. So thank you for that.
Please, to be continued, I'm sure. All right, all the best, and go give Dart some happy snacks.
Yeah,
I think he's hovering around, flying, looking for you now.
He is.
Thanks again, Rick. This is
Take
the
care.
Truth Be Told Transformation, everybody, and I'm Bonnie Burkert, and we have new episodes every week, really trying to give a platform to authors and speakers and light workers that are just trying to help us find a happier, more joyous way to live life and believe in the magic around us always. Tony Sweet, Fridays, 3 p.m. live. Robert Hensley, every single week, reviewing books and telling us about current events in the magical world. So we look forward to hearing from you. Please follow and like and share wherever you can. Give us some comments if you would. And until the next time, always my reminder to you, shine on.